Have you ever stopped to think about where our modern world really came from? I'm talking about our ideas of privacy, consumer culture, even the very concept of public opinion. Well, the answer might surprise you. It's not the 20th century, or even the 19th. We have to go back to the 18th century. It was a time of such massive change that it basically created the blueprint for the world we all live in right now. So let's dive in and see how it all happened. To really get a feel for how huge this shift was, just imagine the world before the 1700s. Your entire life was pretty much mapped out for you. Power came from God and the king, end of story. Your identity? That was tied to your religion and the village you were born in. But over the course of 100 years, everything got turned upside down. Power started coming from new places, like human reason and the marketplace. And identity, well, that became something you could actually build yourself, through the things you bought and the ideas you chose to believe in. So how on earth did such a massive transformation happen? We're going to break it all down. First, we'll set the stage with a world being remade. Then, we'll dive into the new consumer culture, the incredible revolution in reading, and how art changed to reflect this new age. And finally, we'll tie it all together to see how these forces forged the modern world we know.
Now, this wasn't just one single event. You have to think of the 18th century as a kind of perfect storm. You had three massive movements all hitting at the same time. The huge intellectual awakening of the Enlightenment, a brand new way of shopping called the Consumer Revolution, and a reading revolution that completely changed how ideas spread.
Okay, let's start with the money, because for the very first time in history, you have this growing middle class with money to spend. And how they decided to spend it, well, that changed everything. This wasn't just about buying more stuff. This was about using your purchases to say something about who you were.
It sounds like a pretty simple question, doesn't it? But the answer is just profound. The act of shopping, something we do all the time, became a revolutionary force. It gave people a brand new way to express their identity, to show off their status, completely outside the old, rigid rules of the past. And here is the absolute key to understanding this. It was a shift from buying out of necessity to buying out of desire. See, before, you bought a pot because, well, you needed a pot to cook. But now, you bought a specific kind of pot because it showed you had taste, that you were sophisticated. This whole new economy, based on desire, is what reshaped society.
So what were they actually buying? It's fascinating because the new status symbols were so specific. Things like porcelain dishes, which used to be only for the super rich, were now on middle-class tables. Mirrors and fancy cotton fabrics for the home. These things allowed people to curate their own space, to turn their homes into a reflection of their own taste.
And all this buying didn't just fill up houses. It fundamentally redesigned them. Before this, a home was basically one big, public room where everyone did everything. But the 18th century home, that evolved into a collection of private, specialized spaces. You know, like a dining room, a bedroom, a concept we just totally take for granted today.
And nothing illustrates this better than the invention of the bourgeois. This was a room designed specifically for the wife of the house, as her own private retreat. I mean, think about that. A space dedicated to a single individual just for them. It was the physical proof of a radical new idea that your private inner life really mattered.
Okay, so as people were building these new private lives for themselves, they were also plugging into a huge new public world of ideas. And that was all thanks to more people learning to read and the incredible power of the printing press.
You can literally see this shift happening in the publishing data from France at the time. For centuries, the #1 bestseller was, of course, the Bible. But in the 18th century, look at this. Religious book production just plummets. And at the same time, secular books, history, science, art, they absolutely explode. People weren't just reading to save their souls anymore. They were reading to understand their world.
And the poster child for this whole movement has got to be Diderot's encyclopedia. On the surface, its goal was just to collect all of human knowledge. But what it really did was challenge the authority of the church and the king by arguing that human reason, not tradition, was the ultimate tool for understanding everything. It was basically a weapon of the Enlightenment disguised as a very large set of books.
But ideas stuck on a page are just static. They need a place to come alive. And that place was the coffee house. See, unlike a rowdy tavern fueled by alcohol, these news spots were all about caffeine-fueled debate. It was the perfect stimulant for the age. It promoted clarity and rational thought. This is where ideas from books were argued over, pulled apart, and transformed into something incredibly powerful: public opinion.
So we have new things to buy and new ideas to read. It just makes sense that art was going to change too. It started to shift away from just glorifying God and kings and instead began to reflect the lives and the values of the very people who were buying the porcelain and reading the pamphlets.
And you can really see this evolution play out across three big styles. You start with Baroque art, which is all dramatic and over the top, designed to make you feel awe for the power of the church and state. Then you get art for the new middle class. Think of Vermeer's quiet, dignified paintings of people in their homes. And finally, you have neoclassicism, which looked back to ancient Greece and Rome to promote ideas like reason, order, and civic duty. This neoclassical style, with its clean lines, its symmetry, its logic, it became the official architecture of the Enlightenment. Buildings like the Pantheon in Paris weren't just big, impressive structures, they were powerful statements. They were arguments made of stone for a new kind of society, one built on reason and republican ideals, not the divine right of some king.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We've got a new consumer economy, a new public sphere of ideas, and new art for a new kind of person. So how did all of this combine to lay the very foundations of our world today? Well, literature gives us the perfect snapshot. The hero of the new 18th century novel wasn't a saint or a king, it was the individual. Think about Robinson Crusoe, a man surviving all alone using his own wits. Or Goethe's Faust, searching for meaning on his own terms. And of course, Jane Austen, who brilliantly dissected private life and social manners. These are the kinds of stories we are still telling ourselves today.
So if you take away nothing else, remember these three pillars that the 18th century gave us. First, the rise of the individual, the idea that a single person's experience is what truly matters. Second, the power of public opinion, the belief that the collective voice of the people can challenge authority. And third, the centrality of commerce, the reality that what we buy is a huge part of who we are.
And this is why this history is so alive and so important. It isn't some abstract thing from a textbook. The simple act of closing your bedroom door to have some privacy, of expressing yourself through your clothes, of debating politics with a friend over coffee, all of these things we do, their roots are right here, in this revolutionary century.
Which really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. The people of the 18th century, whether they knew it or not, built a whole new world based on the most powerful ideas of their time. So it makes you ask the question, right? 250 years from now, when people look back at us, what will they say were the foundational ideas we were building with today?